Um, in the book I read, Situations Matter, written by Sam Summers, you learn just how little control you have over your life. Many people don't realize how much they change when they're placed in different situations and how much they notice in those situations. So, although there are many different aspects of the book, I think it can be reduced down to three. And those three I would choose are how situations affect our behavior, how situations change the way we love, and how situations change the way we hate. The first big idea, how situations affect our behavior, attempts to disprove the idea of what you see is what you get. More often than not, people assume they know exactly what's happening in the situation they are in and what they're doing because of it. Using studies in the book, Summers proves that what you do is not up to you, but rather up to the situation or the place you're in. For example, a study conducted by Masuda and Nisbet in 2001 shows just this. First, people from the US were asked to look at a picture which involved fish swimming with seaweed and other objects in the background. Most of their responses were acknowledging the fish in the front but not taking any note of what was happening in the background. Next, they interviewed people in Japan. People in Japan took large note of everything in the photo, not simply just the fish. They noticed the seaweed and the other objects. This was believed to happen because Japanese culture is more on the collectivism side and the US is more individualistic. So due to the fact that people were in those specific situations or places, they tended to think a certain way. Although lots of data was collected from these interviews, one limitation from this study could be that it's not exactly time effective because interviews tend to take a longer amount of time. The second big idea is how situations change the way we love. The surroundings we are in and the context of the situation greatly impacts the way we see and how we feel about people in respect to love. An experiment that Summers talks about, Finkel and Eastwick, explains how gender roles in correlation to love can completely turn around with the smallest of changes. So to start this experiment, Finkel and Eastwick had 12 girls and 12 boys participate in a round of speed dating, where the girls remained sitting and the boys would move from table to table after 4 minutes. After the round is over, both genders fill out a survey asking whether or not they would go on a date with the people that they talked to. Men on average said yes to 50% more women than women did to men. Next, they repeated the experiment, but this time, women would be the one moving from table to table and the men would stay seated. The results of this said that women said yes to going on a date with 50% more men than men did with women. This study proves that even the smallest change in the situation can change how much you like or even love someone. One limitation to this study would be that because he used such a small sample size, it'd be difficult to generalize to a larger population. So if he wanted to generalize it, he would have to test with larger sample sizes. So the last big idea mentioned in the book is how situations can change the way we hate, and more specifically talked about in the book, the way we hate other people. So Summers states that we find it easier to hate things that are not as associated with us or different from us. So using evidence to back this up, Summers mentions the 1974 Princeton interviewing study. In this study, Princeton gathered together white participants to interview people about a job. These people interviewed one African American and one Caucasian person. During the interview with the Caucasian person, the participant showed more signs of eye contact, positive body language, and the interview itself actually lasted 33% longer on average than it did with the African American person. So later the interviewer was asked how they believed the interviews went, and most all participants stated that the Caucasian person had a better interview than the African American one did. So in times where a decision is required, many people alienate and disregard someone simply because they are different from them. The emotions for that person become more cold and distant simply because they were in a situation where they had to choose over someone that was similar and someone that was not as similar. So one limitation that many people find in this experiment is that they only had Caucasian participants, and many people believe that it would be important to test many people from different races and cultures to see if that actually matched up with people that are Caucasian. I believe knowing about these three big ideas and how much situations really impact the things we do can really help someone see the bigger picture on things. So as talked about quite often in the book, many people have this what you see is what you get mentality, which means that they do not think more into the situation they're in, but rather what is just at the surface. So when people think this way, it makes them blind to a lot of things that are vital in today's society and in their lives. People cannot start to change things that need to be fixed in our society if they are unable to see what the problems really are. Until you learn to see more of what situation you are in, you can't really figure out how to make your own decisions and do things on your own without the help of others. So though it would take a while If everyone was able to remove the what you see is what you get mentality, we'd all be able to think on our own and make better decisions. Thinking on our own would lead us to making better choices because we want to make them, not just the situation we are in, bettering our society as a whole. One quote I found really interesting is, "It's one concrete strategy you can use to break free from the what you see is what you get mentality, from the complacency of looking past context. Force yourself to see familiar situations from unfamiliar perspectives." So I found this quote to be really cool and really interesting because it truly does sum up and explain exactly what Sam Summers was trying to say. Seeing just the front of a situation is not beneficial to your life or others' lives. What is beneficial is seeing into the deeper, bigger picture story, and it can be done by looking at it from different perspectives so you see what other people think of the situation. The last and final quote I wanted to share is, "Even being with imaginary people shapes how we think about ourselves." So I found this quote to be really important and necessary to share because it shows just how easily people can conform, even when there's no actual evidence of other people being around. How we think is up to others so much, the thought of others being there can change how we think and how we act. Summers attempts to remove the drive for conformity in people by acknowledging the fact that conforming is often so unnecessary, people don't even realize it. Without conforming, we would be able to think on our own, making the lives of ourselves and others better.